even though we've got a minuscule number of subscribers, as the person had said.
Your individual contributions are greatly appreciated.
True.
If you enjoyed this content, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe, and share with your neighbors on social media.
Amazing.
Thanks again, and on to the video. There's a common liberal narrative that exists that the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany were somehow bosom buddies leading all the way up to World War II. That Hitler and Stalin had a beautiful bromance and admired each other's mustaches very much. In fact,
bros before hoes, am I right? Bros before hoes.
So much so that they decided to sign a treaty by the name of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The pact was a formal agreement by both sides that neither of them would attack one another. And then you had the Soviet Axis talks of 1940, in which the Soviet Union was considered for a potential entry as a fourth Axis power during World War II. The talks included the partitioning of land and spheres of influence between the Russians, the Germans, the Italians, and the Japanese, in which the Soviets sought to secure territorial hegemony in the Baltics, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, and part of Finland as well. The Molotov-Ribbentrop.
The USSR doesn't take, it only gives. So we already know that's a lie. We already know that's a lie. The Soviet Union never took, it only gave. So, you know, we're not falling for the Western propaganda over here, comrades. I would click on this title if I weren't already here. Perfect. Perfection. This is high quality. Now we're talking.
Pact and the Soviet Axis talks are frequently used as evidence that the Soviets and the Nazis were planning to collaborate, and that by extension, communism and fascism are two sides of the same coin.
No, nobody says that, actually. Yeah, the Soviet Union and the Nazis did in fact cooperate, but that does not mean that Nazism and communism are two sides of the same coin. First of all, the USSR does not represent the idea of communism, so let's put that idea to bed. So no. What argument are you fighting against?
And that the only reason it didn't happen is because their plans fell through or something. Two genocidal totalitarian regimes that sought to team up with one another for world domination.
I mean, correct. Yeah. They were two totalitarian and genocidal regimes. I refer you to the special NKVD operation of 1937-1938. He's not looking at the camera. Low quality. Well, you know, it's high effort. It's a high effort video essay. Don't be a bully.
Therefore, communism and fascism are one and the same.
No, what?
Be it consciously or subconsciously.
Who says that? I've never heard this argument before. Fellow traveler is the first person who has acquainted me with the idea that anyone would say that fascism and communism are the same. Look at these screen errors. Low quality. Well, no, but communism, in quotation marks, is just fascism in the way of the USSR. Yeah, but it's not communism. U.S. military and CIA intervention since World War II. What does that have to do with the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact? I guess we'll find out.
This is the narrative that they push in order to get liberalism off the hook for its far more prevalent and well-documented collaborations and associations with fascism, since with the exception of World War II, It has been the liberal governments of the world that have historically and continue to this day choose to actively support and enable far-right dictatorships abroad. While the most potent anti-fascist force that humanity has ever known has actually potent anti-fascist support and enable.
What does that have to do with this map?
Far-right dictatorships abroad.
Is Germany a far-right dictatorship abroad? Is France a far-right dictatorship abroad? What is this map? I return. Welcome. Welcome back. That is so bizarre.
Abroad. While the most potent anti-fascist force that humanity has ever known has actually been the Soviet Union and communist regimes of the like.
The most potent anti-fascist force has been the Soviet Union and the like. The Holodomor, which I know you don't believe that happened. The NKVD operation of 1937-1938. Oh! What about the most non-fascist thing that the USSR has done for Poland after World War II? You know, turning it into an ethno-state. That seems like a thing that the most anti-fascist force on earth would do. Turning a multi-ethnic country into an ethno-state. That feels like fighting fascism to me. You know what was a fun video? That goofy one about how Poland rages and takes over the whole world. True. True. We're not gonna glorify Poland today. We're gonna learn why Poland actually betrayed the biggest anti-fascist force in the universe. So strap yourself in.
Let us talk about this narrative that the Soviets and the Nazis were planning on teaming up, as though Hitler hadn't already long premeditated his conquest of Eastern Europe as to secure plenty of territory for the new German Empire. This is the first point that I would like to bring up against the Soviet-Nazi alliance narrative. It was literally never going to happen.
If it was never going to happen, then why did it happen? That's my question of a naive watcher who does not do high quality content. If it was never going to happen, then how did it happen? I guess we'll learn in the video. But consider me intrigued, okay? I am intrigued by this premise. Let's go. It was never going to happen.
There are two main reasons why this is.
Okay.
The first reason is because the Nazis had long declared the Jewish-controlled communists to be their arch-nemesis decades prior to that, as in an interview with the American Monthly magazine in 1923.
Have you heard of a term, temporary alliance? Just because they have declared them enemies, that does not mean that a temporary alliance when interests align could not ever happen. So I guess your first reason just goes out the window, straight into the trash. Because in fact, a temporary alliance did happen. And it lasted all the way till Germany attacked the Soviet Union. You saying that the Nazis may have lied or gone against their own values? You know how Nazis are, truth sayers.
Hitler himself considered Bolshevism and communism to be his sworn enemy. Bolshevism is our greatest menace. Kill Bolshevism in Germany and you restore 70 million people to power. France owes her strength not to her armies, but to the forces of Bolshevism and dissension in our midst. The Treaty of Versailles and the Treaty of Saint-Germain are kept alive by Bolshevism in Germany. The peace treaty and Bolshevism are two heads of one monster. We must decapitate both. We want a greater Germany uniting all German tribes, but our salvation can start in the smallest corner. Even if we had only 10 acres of land and were determined to defend them with our lives, the 10 acres would become the focus.
Those quotes are literally irrelevant to the fact that a temporary alliance between these countries happened. Who knows?
Of regeneration. Our workers have two souls. One is German and the other is Marxian. We must arouse the German soul. We must uproot the canker of Marxism. Marxism and Germanism are antitheses. Furthermore, when one considers the Nazi propaganda and polemics that was widely disseminated to the general German public throughout the 1930s, it's pretty clear that the Nazis didn't just want to eradicate the Jews, they also looked down upon the totality of the Slavic people, seeing them as subhuman and frequently portraying them as such in their propaganda. The purpose of this, of course...
I mean, that's true, but it's also irrelevant to the question if a temporary alliance between these countries happened. So, yeah, okay.
Was to instill a sense of racial superiority amongst the Germans, along with providing ideological justification for the expulsion of the Slavic people from their lands in Eastern Europe, so that the Nazis could make way for German settlers.
Again, it's true but irrelevant.
The Nazis even made propaganda depicting Stalin and the Jews, along with presumably other Slavic people hanging dead from the gallows, as well as other art showcasing the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory of communists being a Jewish-controlled plot. The second reason...
Yeah, they both Hitler and Stalin thought they were using one another when making the temporary alliance. That just does not demonstrate anything.
Why the Soviets and the Nazis were actually mortal enemies was because the Nazis had plans from the get-go to revamp the German Empire by conquering and emptying out Eastern Europe in a systematic, genocidal, settler-colonial speedrun named Lebensraum. Lebensraum, which directly translates to living
Lebensraum
space in German, was the Nazi equivalent to Manifest Destiny, or their desire to transform Eastern Europe and most of Russia into one giant settler colony in a similar manner that the founding fathers of the United States sought to clear out and conquer Native American territory out west to make space for white settlers. Hitler...
Okay, all of this is irrelevant.
Himself frequently lauded the United States settler colonialism and racially supremacist policies as the key contributing factors for its success, and sought to carry out his own manifest destiny out in Central and Eastern Europe. Quote, in North America, where the population is prevalently Teutonic, and where those elements...
All of this is just fluff. This is not a high effort. This is not a high effort video essay. It's just filler. Yeah, okay. So Hitler was planning to betray the USSR when they did their alliance. That happened.
Intermingled with the inferior race only to a very small degree, we have a quality of mankind and a civilization which are different from those of Central and South America. In North America, the Teutonic element, which has kept its racial stock pure and did not mix it with any other racial stock, has come to dominate the American continent and will remain masters of it as long as that element does not fall victim to the habit of idolatrating its blood. Unquote. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf, page 229.
Okay.
Quote, that the American Union was able to achieve such a threatening height is not based on the fact that millions of people formed a state there, but on the facts that many square kilometers of the most fertile soil is inhabited by millions of people of the highest racial value, unquote. Mein Kampf, Volume 1, page 113.
Okay.
Quote, those who eat German bread do not think about the fact that it comes from granaries we conquered in the 12th century. A similar process will repeat itself in the East for a second time as in the conquest of America, unquote. In the face of this, any alliance or neutrality pacts that were signed by the two powers leading up to World War II were never going to be sincerely upheld by the Germans, since their broader imperialist ambitions.
It's irrelevant. They were upheld for a time. They were temporary.
Ambitions necessitated the genocide of Russia, Poland, as well as most of Eastern and Central Europe. Hitler even said this much in his Obersalzberg speech. Quote, "Our strength lies in our quickness and in our brutality. Genghis Khan has sent millions of women and children."
Is that really what passes for high effort? Really?
Into death knowingly and with a light heart. History sees in him only the great founder of states. For the goal to be obtained in the war is not that of reaching certain lines, but of physically demolishing the opponents. Colonel General von Brautisch has promised me to bring the war against Poland to a close within a few weeks. Had he reported to me that he needs 2 years or even only 1 year, I should have not given the commands to march and should have allied myself temporarily with England instead of Russia, for we cannot conduct a long war. Poland will be depopulated and settled with Germans.
Okay.
My pact with the Poles was merely conceived of as a gaining of time. As for the rest, gentlemen, the fate of Russia will be exactly the same as 1 a.m. now going through with the case of Poland. After Stalin's death, he is a very sick man, we will break the Soviet Union. Then there will begin the dawn of the German rule of Earth. The attack upon and the destruction of Poland begins early Saturday.
This is so irrelevant that I don't know what to respond to this. Those are just quotes. And it does not refute anything about the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. It does not refute anything about the fact that Germany and the USSR had a temporary alliance.
Whether the world believes it is quite indifferent. The world believes only in success, unquote.
Okay.
Taken directly from Hitler's Obersalzberg speech.
Okay.
In the face of these facts alone, the liberal notion of an alliance between communism and fascism completely falls apart.
Nobody
After all, it's kind of
says
impossible to have a sincere alliance with somebody who actively wants your head on spike. On the other hand, the Soviets knew and were very well aware that the invasion was inevitable from the start. Stalin said this much in 1931. Quote, "We are 50 or 100 years behind the advanced countries. We must make good this distance in 10 years. Either we do it or we shall be crushed," unquote. Joseph Stalin.
That's a quote that is supposed to prove that the USSR knew about the Nazi Germany invasion? Wait, you said in 1931? So before the Nazi regime even came to power? Stalin foresaw Nazi invasion before Nazis came to power? Was he a Nostradamus? I have to listen to that again. That's impossible.
On Soviet industrialization. And so the primary motivation for Soviet collectivization, either we years behind, said this much in 1931. Invasion was inevitable from. On the other hand, the Soviets knew and were very well aware that the invasion was inevitable to have a sincere alliance with somebody who actively wants your head on spike. On the other hand, the Soviets knew and were very well aware that the invasion was inevitable from the start. Stalin said this much in 1931.
Stalin knew that Nazi Germany would attack before Nazi Germany was a thing. Amazing. High effort video essay. The Nazis came into power in 1933, but Stalin somehow already in 1931 predicted that the Nazi Germany would inevitably invade the USSR and that they would not have an alliance. And to prove it, we quote Stalin, who basically
Quote,
says,
"We are 50 or 100 years behind."
And to prove that the invasion is inevitable, we will quote Stalin saying, we need to industrialize or else we will be weak. And it's acceptable to attack. This is high effort video essay.
The advanced countries. We must make good this distance in 10 years.
This cannot be
Either
real.
we do it or we shall be crushed, unquote. Joseph Stalin on Soviet industrialization. And so the primary motivation for Soviet collectivization and superindustrialization, aside from building socialism and elevating living standards, also included the very
Ah, yes. Elevating the living standards of the genocided workers.
Survival of the Russian people. And it's a good thing that they did superindustrialize, as Russia was the poorest country in Europe at the time. And so, in order for them to close the economic gap with their much wealthier and far more powerful Western colonial neighbors by a wide enough margin to where they actually stood a fighting chance, they needed an economic miracle, and no version of capitalism was going to make that happen.
That's right. The Holodomor was the miracle that they needed, the 5-year plan.
The research shows that with respect to economic system, that the centrally planned socialist model blows the capitalist alternatives out of the water.
Ah, yes, this is why the Soviet Union fell. Because the model of the Soviet Union just blows everything out of the water.
Completely outpacing their growth rates and giving Russia the industrial base that it needed to compete with the West in modern warfare.
Well, that is what slavery will do. That is what utilizing slave labor will do. And that is quite literally what the USSR did, by the way. To industrialize.
That's right, viewer. Capitalism wasn't going to cut it. So regardless of how you individually feel about Stalin, his administration was directly responsible for stopping the Nazis and saving Eastern Europe from certain genocidal slaughter.
No. First of all... Okay, there's so much wrong here. First of all, the USSR did not stop the Nazis. It would have fallen without the help of the West. Second of all, the USSR did not wish to save Jewish people from the Holocaust. The only reason why the camps were liberated is because they were convenient stops along the way to Berlin. Third of all, there was a plan to enact a Stalin's own genocide on the Jewish people, which I'm happy to elaborate on if fellow traveler even sort of takes the effort to watch this. Oh, not then. We're not talking about the Stalinist times.
Furthermore, there's the fact that the Soviet Union's pact with Germany was nothing unique for the time. Throughout the 1930s, there were dozens of similar neutrality pacts and treaties signed between the Axis and allied European countries as well.
Yeah, that was not the unique part of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. The unique part of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact was the extra clause about dividing up Poland between themselves. But I guess I know where this is going. He's gonna say, oh, but that clause was only added in case Poland would fall. so Soviet Union could sweep in and save it. Which is bullshit.
And yet it's only the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact that people point to whenever they try to assert the link between communist and fascist collaboration.
Yeah, maybe because other neutral pacts do not involve dividing a third-party country in half between the neutral parties. You know, that little bit of a detail.
The fact of the matter was that the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Russia, along with numerous other countries were all signing neutrality pacts with one another at the exact same time.
That's not the thing that is... That's not the thing that people focus on when they discuss the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. The fact that it was a non-aggression pact.
And yet there are no accusations of a French-Italian fascist alliance or a British-German fascist
I wonder why.
alliance. Instead, it's the Soviets alone who seemingly are the only ones that ever get burned for it. And
Gets burned for it.
on the contrary, out of all of the Allied powers during World War II, it was the Soviet Union alone who were the ones taking unilateral efforts to combat fascist aggression, while the rest of the Western powers stood idly by while the Germans remilitarized and proceeded to invade and illegally occupy their neighbors.
The USSR invaded and illegally occupied Poland. What do you mean? The USSR invaded before the Polish government left the country.
Quote, "It would be difficult to find in the history of diplomacy such a good record of rebuffs to a great power as were bestowed on the efforts of the Soviet government to secure..."
In fact, in invading Poland, the USSR broke a neutrality treaty with it.
Collective security against the aggressors from 1934 to 1939. The Soviet Union became a member of the League of Nations in September 1934. In 1935, it signed with France a pact of mutual assistance against aggression and made the pact subordinate to the League. Notwithstanding this, Britain refused to join with them, while most of the press of Britain denounced the pact. In 1935, the British government violated its commitments to the covenants of the League and made a separate naval pact with Germany. The Anglo-German Naval Treaty was a rebuff to all the powers in the League, which, only 2 months before, had condemned the introduction of conscription into Germany. Hardly had this episode occurred, then it was followed by the unsavory experience of Italy's war on Abyssinia, in which...
Another irrelevant quote, by the way. Which actually proves the opposite of what this person's saying.
The League powers could not bring themselves to the point of exercising the only sanction that could be effective against Italy, that of the oil embargo. In this situation, the Soviet government made it clear that it was prepared to fulfill any decision taken by the League to assist Abyssinia. Then came the tragedy of Spain, in which Hitler and Mussolini played the leading roles in. The democracies refused to intervene. Soviet Russia alone sent material aid. A non-intervention committee was formed. The fascist powers intervened on the side of Franco while remaining members of the committee. Soviet Russia intervened on the side of the democratic governments while also remaining a member of the committee. To the annoyance of the British and French governments, that is. When Hitler's army marched into Austria, the Soviet governments proposed on the 17th of March, 1938, that the non-aggressor powers should meet in conference in order to secure a firm and unambiguous stand in regards to the problem of collective salvation of the peace by the great powers. This was rejected by the British and French governments as inopportune. When the drama moved onward to Czechoslovakia, Soviet Russia declared on the 11th of May and on the 25th of August, 1938, that she would carry out to the letter her pledges to France and Czechoslovakia. She met with no response. As the crisis grew, again on the 2nd and 11th of September, she proposed at Geneva a joint demarque of the USSR, Britain, and France in favor of the Czechs and the use of Article 11 of the Covenant of the League of Nations. Again, there was no reply.
Wait. Still, the Soviet government tried to come to an agreement with the Democratic Party. On the 15th April, the British ambassador asked the Soviet government to make an unilateral guarantee of Poland and Romania. And the Bolsheviks answered on the 17th April with a proposal for a triple pact. So they refused to do the guarantee of Poland and Romania. That's actually a pretty big, significant factor, wouldn't you say? Literally, when the British government, ignoring the proposed triple pact, put forward what the Bolsheviks considered by one-sided agreement.
On the 15th of April, the British ambassador asked the Soviet government to make a unilateral guarantee of Poland and Romania. The Bolsheviks answered on the 17th of April with a proposal for a triple pact of Britain, France, and the USSR against aggression anywhere. This proposal included mutual assistance between the three powers, a military convention to enforce the pact, and a guarantee of all border states from the Baltics to the Black Sea. There was no reply until the 9th of May, when the British government, ignoring the proposed triple pact, put forward what the Bolsheviks considered to be a one-sided agreement with regards to the border states, without any indication of what military assistance would be received by the Soviet government from Britain and France should the fulfillment of the obligations lead to war. Unquote. J.T. Murphy, Russia on the March, a study of Soviet foreign policy, Chapter 5.
And so, to summarize the aforementioned article, when the Italians invaded Abyssinia, the Soviets alone were the only ones who provided material support to the region. When the Germans rolled into Czechoslovakia and Austria illegally, it was the Soviets alone who were prepared to provide military assistance to them. While Franco's fascist
Wait, so why didn't the USSR provide military assistance to Poland in 1939 during the aggression? Explain that to me. If they could militarily assist a country a year before, why didn't they do so in 1939? Interesting. What a question. I expect an answer. Expect an answer from this high effort. Especially when Stalin knew in 1931. True.
Forces wreaked havoc across Spain. It was the Soviets alone who provided military assistance to the progressive forces in the country. All of this was happening while Britain and France did nothing but take a blind eye to it.
So why didn't the USSR support militarily Poland?
And right before World War II,
Stalin had 1 million troops ready to be sent. What?
the Soviets proposed a military
I thought everybody always says that the Soviet Union had to do the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact because they were not ready. 1 million troops? Was he lying about that? Why didn't he send the 1 million troops to support the Polish soldiers fighting? What's up with that? Especially since I will remind you, when the Soviet Union invaded from the east, Polish soldiers were ordered not to fight them. Just a little bit of trivia for you.
alliance with France and Britain, with plans to do a preemptive strike and joint intervention on the aggressive Nazi Germany, only for said proposal to be shot down and for the British to make a one-sided counter-proposal where the Soviets would be obligated to help them out if they were in need, but the British were not obligated to help the Soviets out should they be invaded. No, it wasn't until Germany, Italy, and Japan threatened to take over and conquer British and French colonies down in Africa and in Southeast Asia did they truly get involved in the war. And so while the communists were out there for half a decade taking unilateral steps to fight fascist aggression,
and yet they had no problem in taking over Poland, so and a lot of the land was taken over forever, so
liberal powers stood idly by and did nothing but let the problem fester. And yet liberals have the gall to cherry-pick these historical facts in a vacuum while ignoring all of the relevant context surrounding them just so they can use it to effectively invoke horseshoe theory and get their own ideology off the hook. When the fact
nobody says that. Literally nobody says that communism and Nazism is the same. It was a temporary alliance. What am I... Okay. Wait. That's the whole video? Are you kidding me? The truth about the Molotov-Ribbentrop... The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact has not even been mentioned. Is this a joke? Is this your high effort video essay? Not even mentioning the part of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact about dividing Poland between Germany and the USSR? Not even trying to excuse it? It's... Is this a joke? That's the end? I thought there was build-up to explain, you know, the title, the truth about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Oh my god. Nobody's going to mention that. Oh yeah, okay, let's...
fact of the matter is that it has been the communists and the fascists who have been sworn enemies since the start, while liberalism doesn't really take the threat of fascism that seriously in the grand scheme of things, since fascism is not really a threat to private property. And so, in the face of these facts, I ask you, liberal, who are the real fascist collaborators here?
The people that invaded and split Poland between themselves and the Nazis. I would say them. I will leave it up to you to name them. I will leave it up to you. If you've enjoyed this mess, press like, subscribe. This was a high effort react, as you can see. It was amazing. Press the bell. Leave a comment below. What a video. High effort video. It's unbelievable. I'm stumped. I'm really stumped now. I expected something else, admittedly. And I guess that's basically what we get. A video about the Ribbentrop-Molotov that does not speak about the pact itself, like, at all. Hey, other people had non-aggression pacts as well. Why is everybody just talking about the Ribbentrop-Molotov one? Oh, goodness. I just don't know what to do with this. What an amazing high effort video. What other videos did you make? This dude debated Vosh, by the way. Two sides of the same coin. Vaush and the cultist Spank dude. Death toll trouble. A proper leftist stance on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Or what every leftist is getting wrong. Now we have to watch this. Okay, we're binging this guy now. I've decided. And if you want to stop me, then you have to, I don't know. Listen, if you want to stop me, then donate. I'm gonna be a President Sunday orbiter now. Donate $100 to Skip to Theory. And we're going to do our version of Theory then. That's right, I've got Theory prepared. And you'll be surprised what sort of Theory I've got in store for you. Let me just say, it's the type of Theory that you're not gonna get on President Sunday's show. Probably. Maybe. Although, who knows? Maybe you will. This is so weird. On this thumbnail, Vosh looks like a cat that's about to vomit. You know? That is the kind of face that cats do when they're about to vomit. Even the tongue sort of curls a little bit like that when cats are about to throw up some hairballs. Yeah. This is so weird. But yes, remember, if you want me to switch to Theory, then you must donate. Because I cannot survive without your donations, for one.
In the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, mainstream talking heads, demagogues, ideologues, and various grifters have all harped on the opportunity to voice their support for their chosen tribe.
Okay, this audio is horrible.
Be it the NATO imperialists who are currently using Ukraine to fight a defensive proxy war against Russia, or be it the Russian oligarch.
A defensive proxy war against Russia. A defensive proxy war. How long ago is this? 1 year ago. So I guess he went a long way since then.
Which is now engaged in a hostile corporate takeover of another sovereign country. Whichever way you look, self-described leftists and national chauvinists have come out of the woodwork to explain to you why you, as a working-class person, have a stake in this inter-imperialist conflict between inter-imperialist powers.
Oh yeah, because Ukraine doesn't matter. Saturday night I switch. I got paid, but all of it goes to rent. Well, then unfortunately, we're not gonna do theory yet. And unfortunately, we're going to have to suffer through this a bit. Inter-imperialist, true. True. Vouch.
Spoiler alert, you don't. And today I'm going to explain why that is and provide a principled leftist alternative to the chauvinism, tribalism, opportunism, and pro-imperialist rhetoric as espoused by vulgar socialists from all directions. Starting with the NATO shills, why anybody watches Vosh or Xanderhal is truly beyond me. Neither of these streamers are profound, they don't provide any sort of original or insightful commentary on current events, and there's nothing that you can't...
Projection, thy name is Traveler. You think you're being insightful? You think you're being original? Really? Vosh is more insightful than you. Vosh is more interesting than you. Forget entertaining and funny. Vosh is more educational than you.
Can't get from them that you wouldn't also be able to get out of reading a Wikipedia or CNN article. Even worse, while mainstream media is not only reporting the news, but making the news on
the Wikipedia is more accurate than you.
This conflict.
The Wikipedia is not sweeping genocides under the rug, and you are. Therefore, the Wikipedia is more accurate of a source than your channel.
These two airheaded shitlibs are coming along and putting an even greater spin on the events, uncritically regurgitating Western imperialist propaganda without the slightest bit of scrutiny from themselves or their audience. At this point, I don't think it's a secret to anyone that Vosh is an extremely Orientalist and xenophobic person, as he has frequently voiced his vitriolic fear and scorn of the incoming barbaric Asiatic hordes coming down on the poor little Ukrainians and Western colonial power.
What? Does this person realize that Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, and Lithuania were considered just as Asiatic as Russia? Does this person know? Is he an idiot?
On the other hand, we have the opposite end of the spectrum, the Russia apologists and Putin shills, who are instead uncritically regurgitating Russian propaganda that this was a humanitarian intervention to save Donbass insurgents from neo-Nazis and to stop an ongoing genocide, as though the 1.2 million people who have been chased...
I guess... Wait, how many people? Also, I guess our friend Traveler is going to be centrist about this.
Out of the country, as though the 1.2 million people who have been chased out of the country...
1.2 million? 1.2 million? I know this is from a year ago, but things have not changed much. Okay? In Poland alone, there are 2 million Ukrainian refugees. In Poland alone. And this guy speaks of 1.2 million people being driven out of the country. Is this a joke? High effort video essayist, by the way. Oh. Quick Google. Let's hear that again, and then I will read you something, okay?
As though the 1.2 million people who have been chased out of the country...
1.2 million have been chased out of the country. Now listen to this. From the beginning of the aggression, of Russian aggression, 15.3 million Ukrainian has crossed the Polish-Ukrainian border. 15.3 million. But sure, 1.2 million people are driven out of the country. Why not? Why not? Granted, many of the people returned home, but 1.2 million is. I don't even know where this person's taking this number from. High effort video essayist.
Every last man, woman, and child is a Nazi and or Azov battalion. They also deny that Russia is an imperialist power in its own right, despite the fact that the modern Russian Federation meets all of the qualifications to be classified as such, according to the Leninist definition of the term.
So, concentration of capital in Russia. Russia, there's an extreme concentration of capital to the degree that exceeds the imperialist powers in Lenin's time. And the vast majority of this capital was not destroyed after the collapse. I mean, a lot of it was just sucked out of the country. It was reorganized and concentrated in a small number of hands. The U.S.-led imperialist bloc tried to seize control of this.
What is this? Is this a debate? I don't care about your debates. Like, at least it's good to know that we have one Stalinist, one brave Stalinist that agrees that Russia is in fact an imperialist country. So credit where credit's due, I guess. Congrats. Congrats.
Formation, but was unable to, which allowed the new bourgeoisie in the USSR, former USSR, transform into an independent national
Freudian slip. Freudian slip.
Bourgeoisie. So basically, based on official statistics, top 600 firms in Russia account for 70% of its GDP. In imperialism, Lenin analyzed the concentration of production into a number of the capitalist countries at the time. So, based on the statistics available, he demonstrated that the economic basis of imperialism in the U.S. in 1909, the largest 30,000 firms accounted for 44% of total GDP. Basically, Russia is even more concentrated and centralized as the modern-day oligarchy is today than America and Britain were back in the early 1900s. So,
and we have to point out too that it's called imperialism, highest stage of capitalism, because this is how all capitalist nations go towards. Some of them don't make it in the long run, but the bigger ones definitely do head that way.
Some of them do. Then we have the export of capital by Russian firms. Gazprom has subsidiaries in 36 countries outside of Russia. In 2016, Rosneft purchased a 98% stake in the India-based oil company SR Oil. So Russia is exporting capital. They are exporting capital. Overall, Russian direct investment abroad exceeds 440 billion. While this pales in comparison to the 5 trillion that the U.S. has in foreign direct investment, it still represents a significant, Russia's a world power, people. It is, for all intents and purposes, a world power. My point is that though the bear has been declawed and defanged and castrated, the bear is still a bear nonetheless. So, the export of capital.
What an odd thing to say.
By Russian firms, struggle between imperialist powers, this fucking war. Let's see what else. Conclusion. Russia is an imperialist power. It's not as developed, and its wealth isn't as concentrated. You know what I mean? Like Western Europe and the U.S., that's pretty much these countries plus their junior partners and offshoots are pretty much the imperialist bloc of the world, constituting 14% of the population while consuming and holding 80% of its wealth and resources. We need to keep in mind that imperialism is a state of being. It is a state of being. It isn't just like it isn't just an action. It's a state of being. It's a degree of capitalist development. And like you said, not all capitalist countries reach the stage of imperialism. But Russia, by these parameters, technically has, and it actually has. But it's not as powerful. It doesn't pose as much of a threat.
So technically or actually has.
And it hasn't engaged in anything near on the level of barbarism and genocide and brutality and inhumanity and atrocities and crimes against humanity that the United States or France, Britain, Germany have.
What? You should learn more about the history of Russia. That's all I have to say about that. There was. Sort of. They sort of went hand in hand. Imperialism. So, well, there was imperialism before capitalism. Yes, there were empires before capitalism. However, colonialism would develop pretty hand in hand with capitalism.
But it's a much smaller player on the world stage.
But yes, empires existed.
It's a smaller player at the world stage, being a smaller, less aggressive imperialist power that isn't damaging the world as much, does not change the fact that it meets all of the classifications necessary to be identified as an imperialist power.
So I think a good analogy would probably be maybe the British would represent the Americans and NATO, and you got like the German Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman empires. Those would represent like modern day Russia. These kind of like they've some stagnated, but they've been trying to catch up with development and having a very.
The German Empire has stagnated somehow? What am I hearing this correctly? Since when? Citation needed? What do you mean has stagnated somehow? The German Empire was newly formed. How could it be stagnating somehow if it formed just not long after the reunification of Germany, before World War I? It just formed and it's stagnated? Right after... Okay.
Autocratic system. But I think that's a really good analogy between the two. It's basically like, they're trying to be the rising power versus the status quo great imperial powers. And the only reason Russia hasn't been able to do anything as horrible as the United States has is because they're not the ones on top. If they were on top, obviously, then it'd be a disaster. But yeah.
And thus, despite being a capitalist country developed at the stage of monopoly, with its own basis of finance capital, with its own financial oligarchy, which exports investment to dozens of countries around the globe, which is in the process as we speak of dividing the world amongst itself and other imperialist powers, Russia is still not seen as imperialist by the Hosler-Maponite cult. The truth is that the reason why Russia and China haven't exercised evil to the degree that the US and Western Europe has and continues to do so is because, 1, it's not in their interest to do so. It's actually within their material interests to do the opposite and offer a better deal to the exploited nations of the world. And number 2, they simply don't have the power to exert violence and coercion onto the world to the same degree that the West has, does, and continues to do. China can't support a defense budget of world conquest proportions. Russia can't leverage its currency against developing nations, directly sanctioning them and starving them to death whenever they fall out of line with Russian interests.
What?
But America can, be it through the overt warfare in the form of invasion and bombing campaigns, be it through the covert warfare via coups and color revolutions, be it through attrition or the direct starving out of entire regions of the globe through sanctions such as Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, Afghanistan, etc. In summary, on a fairly routine basis,
a supporter of the USSR will be telling us about starving regions of the world. Amazing.
America and Western Europe kill, impoverish, and displace orders of magnitude more people than Russia and China ever has and probably ever will.
That's not
And with
true.
that being said, it's time to discuss the principled leftist stance in the wake of this conflict.
Okay.
What is the proper Leninist take, you ask?
Leninist.
2 words. Revolutionary defeatism.
If you guys really want to know what the proper Marxist-Leninist position is on all of this, in the face of all of this,
I don't care about
it is
Marxist-Leninist
to
position.
stand in solidarity with the international proletariat. This doesn't just include the proletariat of Russia, but the proletariat of Ukraine as well. The Russian proletariat and the Ukrainian proletariat.
And we do that by letting Russia win, I guess.
Neither of them are our enemies. They are our allies. They are our comrades. These are the people that we need to stand in solidarity.
The proletariat wants to fight Russia. What now? What now? The people overwhelmingly want to fight. What now?
Support. Not just in their regular everyday struggles, but in their struggle against the imperialists and their own government.
So against Russia.
The imperialists and their own government is what they need to oppose. So we have a duty as Marxist-Leninists to recognize our class interest, our collective class interest.
You're an idiot.
And to build international solidarity among friends and among nations, and stand together as a singular international proletariat, drawing the line between ourselves and our interests and that of the imperialists, the transnational bourgeoisie, and the governments of the world. So to support the Russian government in this instance, to support NATO, to support either side is actually an improper position. And
what about supporting Ukraine? Is that even an option in your world?
Russian people do not deserve to suffer. Ukrainian people do not deserve to suffer.
Okay.
But they're all suffering because capitalism inherently leads to this.
To be a revolutionary defeatist is to be an internationalist. It is to strive for the downfall of one's own government, using the civil unrest and instability brought about by the war as a means to galvanize.
And you think that can be achieved by Russia winning? Brilliant analysis.
Public and unite them against the state. In this way, it's about getting the people to recognize that it's not about NATO versus Russia, nor is it about Russia versus NATO. It's about the international proletariat against the international bourgeoisie.
Ukraine is not even mentioned in this little thing. I guess Ukraine is NATO now.
It's about getting the people to recognize that we don't need to fight and die for their bloody wars of conquest, that we gain nothing by going overseas and murdering people who have never wronged us in their name, that they are using us as pawns in a chess game directly playing with our lives, and that above all else, our real enemies aren't the Russians or Ukrainians, but the imperialists, the capitalist class.
Wait. Not Russian nor Ukrainians. In what world would you even consider seeing Ukrainian people as enemies? Excuse me? You're such an idiot.
Class and the bureaucrats managing their crooked legal systems. In this way, we must stand in solidarity with both the Ukrainian people in their struggle against Russian aggression, as well as the Russian people in their struggle against their Bonapartist governments.
Okay.
On all sides, from all angles, we must oppose the war, oppose the propaganda, frustrate the war, unite with our comrades across borders, and strive for the collective.
This sort of policy, of course, would lead to Russia winning.
Downfall and overthrow of our respective imperialist regimes. In the short term, we should provide any support that we can to Ukrainian refugees fleeing the region, any Ukrainian comrades fighting against their bourgeois government, as well as any Russian comrades who are fighting against their own government as well.
So how many refugees have you taken in? Fellow traveler. I'm guessing not a lot.
Well,
during the Revolutionary War, and a revolutionary class cannot but desire the defeat of its government. This axiomatic and disputed only by consciousness partisans or helpless satellites of the social chauvinists. Among the former, for instance, in Semkoski's of the organizing committee, and among the latter, Trotsky and Bukovoyed, and
also solidarity doesn't mean shit when talked about like this. It's the leftist version of thoughts and prayers at times. True. Why does he keep showing North Korea? Because he's a North Korea shell.
Kautsky in Germany to desire Russia's defeat, Trotsky writes, an uncalled for and absolutely unjustifiable concession to the political methodology of social patriotism, which would replace the revolutionary struggle against the war and the conditions causing it with an orientation highly arbitrary in the present conditions towards the lesser evil. This is an instance of a
This is what happens when people read a bunch of quotes without understanding anything and just roll with it.
High-flown phraseology in which Trotsky always justifies opportunism. A revolutionary struggle against the war is merely an empty and meaningless exclamation, something at which the heroes of the Second International excel, unless it means revolutionary action against one's own government even in wartime. One has only to do some thinking in order to understand this. Wartime revolutionary action against one's own government indubitably means but not only desiring its defeat, but really facilitating such defeat.
That is actually true, which is why they accept it as gospel, because they don't really understand it. I would agree with this, yeah.
Take the example of the Paris Commune. France was defeated by Germany, but the workers were defeated by Bismarck. Had Bukovoyed and Trotsky had done little thinking, they would have realized that they have adopted the viewpoint on the war held by governments and the bourgeoisie. A revolution in wartime means civil war.
Trotsky, the person exiled and murdered by Stalin.
The conversion of a war between governments into the civil war is, on one hand, facilitated by military reserves of defeats of governments, and on the other hand, one cannot actually strive for such conversation without thereby facilitating defeat. The reason why the chauvinists repudiate the defeat slogan is that this slogan alone implies a consistent call for revolutionary action against one's own government in wartime. Without such action, millions of ultra-revolutionary phrases, such as a war against the war and the conditions, etc., are worth less farthing.
Here, Lenin is arguing against Trotsky's opposition to revolutionary defeatism, or the notion that deliberately undermining one's own government during wartime as to accelerate its demise is a form of lesser evil political struggle, and that being opposed to the war in and of itself is the correct line. Effectively, Lenin argues that unless one is willing to carry out direct sabotage against the state, one can claim to be anti-war all that they want. But without direct action to bring about the desired outcomes, the phrase-mongering of revolutionary struggle against the war, and neither victory nor defeat are a little more than meaningless platitudes. And in that effect, being neither in favor of the victory nor defeat of one's own imperialist nation slants a neutrality bias in the favor of chauvinism, and in practice leads to the fermenting of nationalism down the line.
The Tsarist government was perfectly right in asserting that the agitation conducted by the Russian Social Democratic Labor Group in the Duma, the sole instance in the International, not only in
phrase-mongering
of parliamentary opposition, but a genuine revolutionary anti-government agitation among the masses, that this agitation has weakened Russia's military might and is likely to lead to its defeat. This is a fact to which it is foolish to close one's eyes. The opponents of the defeat slogan are simply afraid of themselves when they refuse to recognize the very obvious facts that the inseparable links between revolutionary agitation against the government and helping bring about its defeat. Asking any social democrat who calls himself an internationalist whether or not he approves of an understanding between the social democrats of the various belligerent countries on joint revolutionary action against all belligerent governments, many of them will reply that it is impossible, as Kautsky has done, thereby fully proving his social chauvinism. This, on one hand, is a deliberate and vicious lie which clashes with the generally known facts of the Basile Manifesto. On the other hand, if it were true, the opportunists would be quite right in many respects. Many will voice their approval of such understanding. To this day, we shall say, If this approval is not hypocritical, it is ridiculous to think that in wartime, and for the conduct of a war, some formal understanding is necessary, such as the election of representatives, the arrangement of meetings, the signing of an agreement, and the choice of the day and hour. Only the Semkovskys are capable of thinking so. An understanding on revolutionary action in every single country, to say nothing of a number of countries, can be achieved only by the forces of an example of serious revolutionary action.
Oh my god.
By launching such action and developing it. Such action cannot be launched without desiring the defeat of the government, and without contributing to such defeat. The conversion of the imperialist war into a civil war cannot be made any more than a revolution can be made. It develops out of
just overthrow both Russia and Ukraine for head.
A number of diverse phenomena, aspects, features, characteristics, and consequences of the imperialist war. That development is impossible without a series of military reverses and defeats of governments that receive blows from their own oppressed classes. So, what is the substitute proposed for the defeat slogan? It is that of neither victory nor defeat. This, however, is nothing but a paraphrase of the defense of the fatherland slogan. It means shifting the issue to the level of war between governments and not to the level of the struggle of the oppressed classes against their governments. It means justifying chauvinism of all the imperialist nations whose bourgeoisie are always ready to say and do say to the people that they are only fighting against defeat. The significance of our August 4 vote was that we are not for war, but
well, Russia is quite literally genocide in Ukraine as we speak, so
against defeat.
Amazing.
On closer examination, the
just overthrow both governments. Easy peasy.
Slogan will be found to mean a class truce. The renunciation of class struggle by the oppressed classes in all belligerent countries, since the struggle is impossible without dealing blows at one's own bourgeoisie, one's own government. Whereas dealing a blow at one's own government in wartime is high treason. It means contributing to the defeat of one's own country. Those who accept the neither victory nor defeat slogan can only be hypocritically in favor of the class struggle of disrupting the class truce. In practice, such people are renouncing an independent proletarian policy because they subordinate the proletariat of all belligerent countries to the absolutely bourgeois task of safeguarding the imperial governments against defeat. So whoever's in favor of the slogan, neither victory nor defeat, is consciously or unconsciously a chauvinist. At best, he is conciliatory.
No. If you are working to undermine your government when it's fighting against an overwhelming force, then you're not practicing neither a victory nor defeat. You're practicing defeat. If you're practicing this without understanding any context of what will happen to you should the country fall, then you're just an idiot. But then again, it's easy to be such an idiot when you're comfortably reading quotes in the US where it's safe, where you don't really have to make such choices, where you can comfortably make videos and don't give a shit about people that fight for their survival. Like, this is so pathetic. Pathetic, that's the word. Pathetic.
He is a conciliatory petty bourgeois, but in any case, he is an enemy of the proletarian policy, a partisan of the existing governments of the present-day ruling class. Let us look at the question yet another angle. The war cannot but evoke among the masses the most turbulent sentiments, which upset the usual sluggish state of mass mentality. Revolutionary tactics are impossible if they are not adjusted to these new turbulent sentiments.
Socialists say.
Lastly, let's briefly touch up on those 3 points. Lenin is saying that during times of war and conflict, the collective consciousness of the masses gets emotionally hijacked by a combination of fear and contempt. The first sentiment being the general fear and grief and anguish from being in a state of war in and of itself, the second being hatred of the enemy, or the opposing side in its belligerence during wartime, an emotion that is heavily fostered.
Or, not wanting to die or be genocided. How many victims have we discovered now? Civilians just being shot in the head, tortured, sexually assaulted.
Fostered and fermented by mainstream propaganda, And lastly, the hatred of one's own government and ruling class itself. Think about it. During times of war, people instinctively know on some level that they are being sent to fight and die and kill other human beings on behalf of the wealthy and powerful, and that as the war wages on, as friends, family, and neighbors continue to die off...
That is not what's happening in the Ukrainian-Russian conflict. People are literally fighting for their survival. This is what happens when a person mindlessly reads quotes and does not understand what they are reading. This is what happens when an idiot starts commenting on theory.
As news of war crimes breaks into the public sphere of knowledge, as the country continues to shed blood, money, and resources for the war machine. After a certain point, if the war is not being fought for a just cause, such as national liberation, but is rather an unjust imperialist war of aggression, people are going to pick up on that. They were picking up on that during the Iraq War, they were picking up on it during the Vietnam War, and they're certainly picking up on that again over in Russia as we speak. Nobody likes war. Regular working day people don't want to take up arms against...
And yet, people in Russia are overwhelmingly okay with it.
Other people from another country,
somehow,
whom outside language and cultural differences have more in common with each other than they do with their own respective national bourgeoisie. So in summary, the principled leftist position on both behalf of not just Ukrainian and Russian comrades, but comrades everywhere, is to undermine and sabotage the war machine, to take advantage of people's inherent anti-war sentiments, and to use it to radicalize and galvanize the public against their respective bourgeois governments, to facilitate the downfall and overthrow of their own respective bourgeois governments, to build and cultivate solidarity, and to build connections and networks with socialist orgs across the globe in the pursuit of the formation of a new international workers' movement. And we must not only be actively anti-war and anti-imperialist, we must also actively be carrying out direct struggle against our respective imperialist governments as to ultimately bring about their downfall. At the very least, we should be out there engaging...
You mean like you do? With your channel?
...in anti-war activism, rather than cheerleading for one imperialist oligarchy or another, and the fact that even this basic anti-war position is now considered too...
Or, I don't know, cheerleading in a video essay, basically saying, just overthrow both Ukraine and Russia. Good luck, have fun. LOL. LMFAO. I'm gonna sit here in the US and cheer on you. Good luck, comrades. Good luck.
Far left for mainstream leftist discourse demonstrates a colossal...
Has he even mentioned Ukrainian people? No.
...poverty of proper Marxist theory and analysis on behalf of all of these self-proclaimed leftists involved. If there's one silver lining in all of this, it lies in the fact that major conflicts like this one cause the phony leftist LARPers to expose themselves as the national chauvinists, American exceptionalists, anti-communists, and populist grifting pseudo-fascists that they are. And in my next video, I will be covering these fraudulent opportunists in detail.
Oh well, guess we have to watch the next video now. I told you we were binging this guy. I will leave it to you, Somniostatic, to find the best moments of this. I didn't know this had a direct sequel. Well, hold on. Oh, Vaush is an imperialist American exceptionalist. There you go. Go to the toilet, and when I'm back, we're gonna dissect Vaush. So I have to change the title. I'm back. Remember that donating to Skip to Theory is still an option. And the best part is that you don't even know what sort of theory it is. Oh, we just got a subscriber. Thank you, Stalin, for subscribing to the channel. Thank you very much. Thank you. And welcome to the fold of the streamers. The gigglers. But yes, donate to learn what sort of secret theory we'll be learning. I stand anarcho-Naturism and anarcho-American except true. That is Vaush. That is the Vaush. There, I wrote a thing. I can't believe Vosh said that. I can. I have Vosh's number. I know Vaush. Wait. There you go. The title has been changed. Once again. Once again, we dive into the mysterious lore of Vaush and his evil things that evil people do. And our professor today is going to be the Joker laugh pencil from a cup guy himself, fellow traveler. Without a further ado, show us why Vaush, who looks like a vomiting cat, is an imperialist, American exceptionalist, and an enemy to the left. Enemy. Why America really cares about Taiwanese independence, that's for next time. That's for next time. Let us learn.
Hello, comrade.
Just listen and learn. This is a high quality video essay. So shh. I am a proud anarcho-American exceptionalist.
Comrades, today we're going to be responding to some grade A cringe in the form of Vosh's pro-NATO propaganda.
True. Correct. Oh, do you know what I really wonder? Can somebody quickly check this for me? Now that will be a super funny thing to check. You probably don't know what I want to check, okay? But when I tell you, you will agree with me that it's extremely funny indeed. So, when do you think this video was produced? Before the debate or after the Vosh debate? This video is from 1 year ago. When did their debate happen? When did that happen? Before or after this? Can somebody check? Can somebody please check for me if this debate happened before or after? So this video is after the debate, right? This video was produced after the infamous... Okay. Oh wow, fellow traveler has a 3-hour pro-Korea video. That's right. That's right. What did you expect from a serious actor such as fellow traveler? It is high effort content. Don't you forget it. Don't underestimate the power of high effort. Okay? Don't underestimate. Because if you do, bad things will happen. Somehow. Indeed. 2 years ago. Okay. So this means that this is Vosh Hater Boner peak. Peak Vosh Hater Boner. This is revenge. This is video essay form revenge for what happened during the debate. See? We needed this context. And it's extremely funny as well. Vosh will be soon selling pencils from a cup. Which is a really weird thing for a pro-worker person to say, but never mind the illogical stuff.
Today I will be joined by Gengeros. We will be going over how Vosh not
Who? By who?
only has no idea what he is talking about, but the fact that despite any lip service he might pay to being a leftist or anti-imperialist, that all of his rhetoric is utterly meaningless when he equates black and indigenous liberation with the Holocaust and actively aligns himself with NATO and the U.S. State Department.
Projection. Implying Leninists are pro-worker.
The U.S. pulling out of Afghanistan? Bad idea, says Vosh. We just need to stay there a bit longer. We just need to occupy another sovereign nation for a little while longer, make sure that our puppet government can maintain itself without utterly collapsing, and then slowly leave. Even though the Taliban takeover was inevitable, be it if we left now, 10 years from today, or 10 years ago. Russia's a rival imperialist power. We just need to starve them to death with genocidal sanctions. Let their people suffer and toil in squalor, punishing the Russian people directly for the
genocidal sanctions? This person should learn a bit more about economy. Russian people are not starving. In fact, Russian people are pretty unaffected by the war, unlike Ukrainian people who are really affected by the war. Genocidal sanctions. Okay.
The actions of their own undemocratic governments. Then, after we've murdered several million of them through starvation and preventable illness, see if they want to play ball and capitulate to our imperialist interests. And yes, I'm aware that he's backpedaled on this statement, and says that he only wants to sanction the oligarchs, but regardless, given the amount of fear-mongering that
millions of people have not died of starvation and preventable disease in Russia.
That he's done in the past against the swarthy Asiatic hordes, given some of the more overtly racist comments
I guess that debate did not do you well. Pencil
that he's
guy.
made, accusing non-compete of simping for the wussy for defending his own wife from the onslaught of targeted harassments that Vosh has signaled his audience to do towards them. It's pretty obvious that this guy has some pretty Orientalist sentiments alongside his Western chauvinism, anti-communism, and American exceptionalism. Here's the difference between liberal and leftist analysis of imperialism. To the liberal, some interventions are good, some are justified, and the problem isn't imperialism itself. The problem is that we aren't playing the...
So I guess you're a liberal because you seem to be okay with Russia's invasion.
...world police job in a competent way. And that if we could just reform it, you know, maybe democratize NATO here, add a few more gay drone pilots there, cooperatize the US government there, we could have a kind of beneficial social imperialism where we can trample on other nations' self-determination and crush those beneath us in a way that's not as offensive to our moral sensibilities. Let better optics, if you will. This is the mindset of Vosh. In this way, he is very much to the right of Joseph fucking Biden, being more of an interventionist and American exceptionalist and Western chauvinist than Sleepy Joe has thus far. Look at this unbelievably cringe tweet.
Interestingly enough, I've only heard this nickname from far-righters, Sleepy Joe. That is... okay.
Defending and supporting NATO in a little joke, making his case for what he deems anarcho-NATOism. If only it was an actual joke with a punchline that was actually funny. However, when you consider his recent commentary on the subject, it's pretty clear how unapologetically unironic he's actually being. This right here is the central fundamental problem.
I just realized he's right-wing what I felt as communist.
with Vosh, and how his brand of leftism is little more than an active roadblock to actual socialist consciousness. Because rather than opposing the institution of imperialism, he makes it out to be something that we should support and try to reform for the better, as the swarthy Asiatic hordes are just around the corner. When the truth is that there is no good imperialism and there is no reforming it, because the interests of the Western leadership is never in line with the interests of that of the international proletariat. It is always within the interests of the
biggest fighter over here, fellow traveler, from his warm, comfortable house in the US. Projecting racism, classic conservative move, true.
National bourgeoisie to crush the interests of the international proletariat time and time again, as history has repeatedly shown. And yet, through Vosh's anarcho-liberal Chomskyite analysis, this is not the case. Hell, if anything, Vosh is to the right of Noam Chomsky on this, because at least Chomsky understands how Russia is being backed into a corner and threatened geopolitically by the West.
Yes. It seems Russia has been backed into a corner ever since the 17th century. How interesting. A long-term cornering, so to speak.
And that if it weren't for the Western-backed Euromaidan uprising in 2013, that Russia would have likely never had to invade Ukraine in the first place.
For Ukraine to be taken into NATO.
Indeed. If Russia would have just been allowed to control Ukraine, then probably would not have invaded. What a brilliant observation. What a brilliant analysis.
NATO, which is what is repeatedly threatened.
Oh yeah, because it was clearly forced to invade. And you know what? I'm gonna, since this is clearly a high effort essay, I'm gonna just say, to sort of expand on what's being told here, not only would Russia not be forced to invade, but it would never had to genocide people. If only those Ukrainian people didn't fight back against the invasion, then Russia would not have been pushed by Ukraine into a position of being forced to genocide them. What do you know?
Would be a very serious threat to Russian security. There are serious confrontations between Russia and the United States. And once again, are they on the Mexican border, the Canadian border? No, they're on the Russian border. In fact, right at the point of the traditional invasion route.
Yeah. The conflict is on the Russian border, started by Russia.
Through which Russia has been virtually destroyed several times in the past century.
So Russia has been provoked.
Well, what happened? NATO instantly moved to East Germany. Then Clinton came along, expanded NATO right to the borders of Russia. Now there are the new Ukrainian government, the government after the overthrow of the preceding one, the parliament voted.
Self-determination of countries? How silly.
I think 300 to 8 or something like that to move to join NATO.
But you can understand why they would want to join NATO. You can see why Petro Poroshenko's government would probably see that it's protecting his country.
No, it's not protecting. Crimea was taken away after the overthrow of the government.
Imagine being to the right of Chomsky Honk while claiming to be on the left.
You guys ready for some quality cancer?
I am pro-NATO now. I am. I legitimately feel like NATO in its existence really doesn't do anything to materially suppress the cause for socialist war.
This is what happens when a person from the US that has no clue tries to play an expert on Eastern European politics.
Worldwide today, and I feel like the insistence on hyper-fixating on NATO from the perspective of a leftist has been a psyop in favor of the Russian government. I really.
Okay, so time for me to explain why exactly Vosh is absolutely wrong about absolutely everything. NATO was created after World War II as a counter to the Soviet Union and the Soviet-occupied Eastern Europe. It was a military alliance.
Occupied Eastern Europe. It was a defensive alliance against the threat of occupying more countries. You've said it yourself, you idiot. Eastern occupied.
that was created in 1948, immediately after World War II, explicitly as an anti-communist organization. You had members.
No, it was created. Oh my gosh. A dog barking straight into my ear. Thank you for that. It was created as a defensive pact, you know, against annexation of countries. I can't believe that he just said himself, Eastern occupied Europe.
Members of the SS, high-ranking ex-Nazis that were integrated into NATO as officers and high-ranking officials within it, as well as the UN. On top of that, you also had a number of Nazis which were, of course, absorbed into Western intelligentsia. You had the fucking Gestapo that basically became the BND. Like, West German intelligence didn't just absorb the Gestapo, it basically was the Gestapo. So yeah, no, it was originally created as a counter to the Soviets and eventually the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact was created as a counter to NATO, and throughout the course of the Cold War, the NATO was...
Yeah, and guess what? Do you know what the difference between the Warsaw Pact and NATO was? NATO is a defensive pact. The Warsaw Pact, you know, was used offensively against countries that wanted to get any type of freedom. 1968, the invasion of Czechoslovakia. That said, right, Czechoslovakia just wanted to introduce some reforms to give people more freedom. And so it was decided that it had to be invaded by the Warsaw Pact. And do you know what the pretext was? That's right. The pretext was that NATO wants to invade Czechoslovakia actually and take it over. And that NATO controlled Western Germany wants to invade, that it's there any moment, ready to attack. And so, I kid you not, because of NATO, quote unquote, the USSR was forced to perform a special operation in Czechoslovakia. Damn. History likes to repeat itself, doesn't it? Being threatened by NATO? Check. Special operation? Check. The only difference between 1968 and now is that fortunately Ukraine is able to defend itself, where Czechoslovakia was not. But that's the only real difference. That's it. But go on, tell us about how great the USSR was and how evil NATO is. Also, Russia is a lot weaker than the USSR, true.
Basically their military alliance. It was an anti-communist military alliance that has been routinely bombing countries for decades, along with the United States.
What was the goal of forming NATO? It doesn't tell us much to say that it was an anti-communist alliance. What was its goal? Well, you're not gonna tell us, are you? Because the goal was pretty simple. A defensive alliance, but, you know, high quality, high effort video essay over here.
And with the fall of the Soviet Union, you know, they just moved in to absorb Eastern Europe. But anyways.
Oh.
And just a friendly reminder.
Oh, we're just gonna, you know, quickly just mentioned that in passing. Let me hear that again.
Eastern Europe. With the fall of the Soviet Union, countries for decades, along with the United States. And with the fall of the Soviet Union, they just moved in to absorb Eastern Europe.
Absorb Eastern Europe, huh? What does that mean? Absorb Eastern Europe. It was occupied by the USSR. You said it.
But anyways. And just a friendly reminder.
But anyways.
Internal documentation has shown that the collective of Western leadership in 1990 explicitly gave loads of reassurance to the Russian leadership that there would be no reason for NATO to expand eastward with the end of the Cold War, and that Russian geopolitical security would be respected. But as we have seen, this has not been the case, and the West has only continued to pressure Russia and then back them into a corner geopolitically since the fall of the USSR and the end of the Cold War. Documents on screen very much related.
So that was the reason, that's literally the reason why NATO was created. It was created explicitly as an anti-socialist, anti-Soviet org.
So what was its purpose? You're not gonna say it, are you? You haven't said the purpose of its existence once. Well, that could be leveled at non-compete for not letting Luna defend herself. What if this guy denies the Nazi went to South America?
And now it's basically just there for the money laundering through the military-industrial complex. For example, now all NATO countries, I believe, are required to spend at least 2% of their economy on military spending. And ever since Russia invaded Ukraine, we have been seeing every country in fucking Europe just say, you know what, we're going to rearm. We're going to just start spending a shitload on money. And guess what that does? It saps from social spending.
I really do. I genuinely believe that, and I don't care anymore.
Well, maybe Russia should not have invaded. Maybe Russia should not have invaded.
All the imperialist action that NATO has taken is something that could have effortlessly been done by other just European or American military actions without the help of NATO.
Why the hell would the military need to launder? I don't know.
NATO itself doesn't facilitate anything other than protecting countries in Eastern Europe from aggression from Russia.
NATO does not exist to protect the countries of Eastern Europe from Russia. On the contrary, it is thanks to Russia historically that the Eastern European countries even have their national sovereignty back in the first place.
Excuse me?
For one, after the downfall of the Russian Empire, the Soviets would go on to do literal land back, giving regions like Ukraine their own territories, and for two, it is once again...
Land back? Do you mean with Lviv? There was a majority Polish city? What was ethnic cleansed to not be anymore? Land back. Are we talking about Vilnius? That was a majority Polish city, or was turned into a non-majority Polish city? Land back, you say? Oh, interesting. Can you back it up with any, can you elaborate? It was only thanks to Russia that countries even exist. Oh, Ukraine land back. Ukraine that was not allowed to exist by the Soviet Union and it was absorbed into it. People's Ukrainian Republic, People's Republic of Ukraine. What happened to that? Oh yeah, it was dissolved by the USSR.
Again, thanks to the Soviets, that the Eastern European countries were pulled out from the medieval era and rescued from their own fascist governments.
People's Republic of Ukraine. Typical fascistic government. Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but after World War II, it was the Soviets that would subsidize them and help them develop their own self-sufficient economies.
Oh, do you mean when the USSR made Poland its puppet state, took away a big portion of its eastern territories, forbade it from taking the Marshall Plan, forbade it from taking reparations from Germany? Do you mean that? Do you mean those good old times? Thanks, Russia. Thanks. What would Poland have done without you? Oh, yeah, that's right. Poland would have taken Marshall's Plan and would have taken reparations from Germany. That's what it would have done. Thanks, Russia.
And now that communism has been dismantled, most of Eastern Europe has been transformed into neoliberal anti-communist vassal states, rampant with fascism and wholly economically dependent on the EU.
Okay, so this is the equivalent of arguing that there's a Pepsi. I live in a third world country, and a Pepsi plant has been built.
You know nothing about Eastern Europe. Land back.
Stream up the river where my village is at, and this Pepsi plant is polluting the fuck out of my stream. Myself and everyone in the village is contracting cancer. We're getting cancer. There's lead in our water. Getting lead poison.
We are surely getting cancer right now.
People are dying earlier and earlier, and Vosh comes along and he's like, "Well, yeah, they may be polluting your water, but if that Pepsi plant wasn't there, have you considered that if it would be a Coca-Cola plant there instead, or a Sprite plant, or a Mountain Dew plant? It was going to happen anyways."
Yeah, that's exactly what Vosh is saying.
And, they're producing a really good product. People like their soda, so just get the fuck... Like, dude, this is straight up a fucking imperialist apologetics. Like, this dude's, like, straight up a fucking pro-imperialist shill.
Says the person that said that annexing a country's territory and absorbing it is land back. For real? Are you for real?
Like, this is such bullshit. Like, okay, if America didn't try to genocide off the natives, maybe some other European empire would have. That
Are you really going to talk about genocide?
That doesn't change the fact.
The special operation against Polish people, 1937, 1938. One of the blessings that the USSR gave to Eastern Europe. Genocide.
Fact that, like, okay, that's a dumbass hypothetical. We should still oppose it because it is a wing of imperialism, and it is imperialism which we must oppose.
Yeah, you got owned in a debate. And now you have to resort to just commenting with a friend.
100%. I will take it. Yeah. I don't think NATO does that much at all, really, except for prevent. And this, to my knowledge, right now, what NATO does presently is prevent Russian imperialism. That seems to be the thing it's doing. Just admit you're a social democrat then and quit masking as socialist. So you don't even know. What does socialism have to do with this? You don't even know. You don't know what these terms mean.
Yeah, no, that's just straight up bullshit. NATO's been the one doing military buildup and encroaching closer and closer on Russia's border. Not the other way around.
Yes, NATO was gonna invade Russia. The nuclear power. For sure. For sure.
Russia hasn't really... I mean, up until now, Russia has not been fucking going around just conquering, like, directly intervening, conquering and absorbing territories and threatening countries left and right.
Is that so? Georgia? Didn't Russia do an invasion a couple of years prior to Ukraine? What do you mean? What do you mean Russia has not been annexing or invading territories left and right? It literally has. Are you an idiot? Do you have to do high effort? Do you need to do a high effort research into Russia's post 91 history?
Right, militarily. The reason why it went into Ukraine is because it was threatened, backed into a corner, and pushed into doing
Yes,
so. It's so unbelievably incorrect. Like seriously, the dude is just so he's Russia-phobic. Like, well, we need NATO to protect us from the big bad barbaric Asiatic horde.
Yes. Russophobic.
Like it's
they were pushed into doing the genocide, you see.
Straight up xenophobia and Russophobia. Is there really any difference between this asshole and a neocon? Just saying.
And this is the psyop. To you, socialism is when things sound anti-American. That's what it is to you. That's why there are so many online leftists who are hand-wringing at opposition to Russia, when Russia is more capitalist and fascist than the United States by almost...
Another stupid point. Like, this dude is just a non-stop bad takes factory. He's a bad takes factory. Like,
how ironic.
That's not even, like, remotely fucking true. Again, Russia's not the one going around starving poor nations to death with genocidal sanctions. They're not the ones going around
how ironic
overthrowing sovereign governments and coups. They're not the ones militarily invading left and right. Yeah, they're an imperialist power, but like
yes, Russia has not been doing any invasions.
Like, this is like, you know, this is like being covered from head to toe in mud and just completely covered in like a 1-inch thick layer of mud.
True.
While pointing to the person over there who's got like a tiny stain of mud on their t-shirt and being like, "You're covered in mud." You know, it's so stupid.
It's whataboutism.
It is. It's pure whataboutism. And like, why?
What?
It astounds me like how people take this dude seriously. Like,
I guess you're just jealous.
People really think this guy knows anything.
It's okay.
About anything. Like, he's just
says the self-professed expert on Eastern Europe.
Pro-imperialist, pro-NATO shill.
Yeah.
Every imaginable metric. It is farther from socialism than the U.S. Russia makes the U.S., in comparison, look socialist. This is not a high bar to pass, okay? They managed to fall below it nonetheless. That's not my fault. Acknowledging that doesn't make me an imperialist. It is simply a statement of fact. I have yet to see anyone provide for me a convincing argument. What exactly does NATO do that is imperialism? Please let me know.
Oh man,
Afghanistan,
I can name quite a few examples.
Serbia.
Dude, aren't there like several?
Libya.
There are several countries that the U.S. and NATO are like bombing at this time. Libya, Yugoslavia. Those are just the ones that immediately come to mind. Let's see. Let's do 1999 present. So Serbia and Kosovo since 1999. And then we have Bosnia. So yeah, Bosnia, Herzegovina. Then we have their operations in Macedonia, U.S. airspace, Mediterranean Sea, Afghanistan, Turkey, Pakistan. Oh, look at all these countries.
They don't care.
I mean, NATO isn't the primary military arm of imperialism. That would actually be the United States. The U.S. is the one that does the bulk of it. NATO was created as a reaction, as a bulwark against the Soviet Union in Europe. That's the reason why it exists. But otherwise, yeah, no, it routinely bombs countries as well. Don't kid yourself.
Oh, you know, you've
like fucking Switzerland and Germany. Like they're in the process of pumping like billions of dollars of arms into Ukraine as we speak. Switzerland arms dictators. Same with Sweden. Like these countries.
How dare you support Ukraine against the genocidal regime?
Fucking export a shit ton of guns and back and provide support to reactionary governments all over the goddamn globe.
Like
they are
Ukraine.
Facilitating to make the world an objectively worse place. They are backing these fucking anti-communist, far-right, right-wing dictators that are explicitly anti-socialist and anti-communist, Vosh.
Can you give us an example of dictators that are being fascistic, that are being supported?
Same with the United States. NATO does it too. They both do it. It's just NATO less so. So, like, how can you honestly sit here and be like, NATO doesn't hinder socialism at all? This is the dumbest fucking take. Like, fucking seriously.
Yugoslav and Libya. Okay, fine. Well, the European powers would have been incentivized to do that either way. The NATO alliance wasn't the thing that allowed that to happen. It was just framed through that. It seems a little
dumb. Again, back to my original point. Oh, there's a coke plant that's polluting the water, poisoning all the villagers in my hometown. Again, well, if it wasn't a coke plant, it would be a Pepsi plant. Yeah. I mean, what kind of fucking ridiculous fucking point is that? Like, yeah, it doesn't change the fact that it's still
debate him. Go on, debate him then.
Happening, and it's still being done. NATO could be called Kurgo Blitz for all I cared. It could be called window glasses. It could be called lamp shading.
What?
It doesn't matter what they fucking call it. It's the institution, and it still needs to be frustrated and opposed. This is a complete and total non-argument.
What?
And like him harping about anti-Americanism, being like, it just sounds like a vessel, like for people to be anti-American. Anti-Americanism is based. America is, for all intents and purposes, the great Satan. Guys, this is what an American exceptionalist and a national chauvinist looks like.
Yep.
Odd to frame it that way. Hassan was talking about NATO. This is the level of brain rot I think people are on right now. Hassan was talking about NATO as though NATO invades countries to make them a part of NATO, like it's an occupying force. And his audience is many times larger than mine. So I think a lot of people, that's what they think of. Like, well, what does NATO do? Well, NATO invades countries and bullies them into join. Well, no, you petition to join NATO. What?
Yeah, no, not how it works at all. Not how it works at all. NATO.
You don't petition to join NATO? Not how it works here? Okay, how does it work then?
Absolutely fucking bullies countries.
NATO bullies countries into joining. That ought to be good. Okay, tell us how NATO bullies countries into joining. That should be interesting. First point is that if it's not NATO, it's something else, and for so long as here a nation like Russia existing, then something like NATO will exist, right?
Either directly or indirectly into joining it, like, because you don't really have a choice.
Can you give an example?
You either kowtow and get in line with the Western hegemon or Western colonial bloc, and submit to austerity and economic restructuring, or you don't do that, and they just sanction you and they just make life very difficult for you. So, I mean, there isn't really much of a meaningless.
I wasn't aware that Ukraine was sanctioned. I wasn't aware of the brutal sanction that Ukraine was under. I must be very ignorant on Ukrainian history if I was not aware of the NATO sanctions of Ukraine because it didn't join NATO. How silly of me.
Choice. Like all the Eastern European.
Sweden and Finland were so heavily sanctioned till just recently. True. My goodness. Crippled by the sanctions.
Countries were in fucking shambles. Many of them opted to get absorbed into NATO because they needed some kind of economic support.
What does that mean, absorbed into NATO? I'm sorry, your pet country USSR, that did the absorbing. What does that mean to be absorbed into NATO? NATO isn't some empire that absorbs countries.
I mean, shit, dude. I mean, you've got like Poland and a couple other countries like Estonia that are just propped up as fucking Western client states, more or less. Just they're just vassals to the EU now. So like, it's just so stupid.
Can you elaborate on that? Vassals to the EU, huh? We're not gonna get an elaboration, are we? How interesting. Because Poland was totally not a puppet state of the USSR, by the way. Between after World War II and 1989, totally not.
Oh, like, dude, they absolutely do. It's through combination of foreign direct investment, other types of investment. The reason why they fucking went in and bombed Gaddafi is because he threatened their hegemony. He was trying to establish an reserve currency for Africa, and he wasn't willing to play ball. He wasn't willing to kowtow. So
is that so?
We ended up destroying his regime. We just went in there. We had NATO bombs, murder a bunch of people, plummet the country into chaos, and we fucking had Gaddafi raped to death with a knife by Western assassins. So yeah, no, dude. He's a fucking, like, imagine thinking this guy's a socialist in any meaningful capacity.
What does that do? The argument I keep running into is that NATO is basically America. Okay. The powers in Europe are aligned with America anyway. If they want to join NATO, they're already in our geopolitical hegemon. If you say, like, spreading the interest of NATO is part of the U.S. geopolitical hegemon, then okay. If they want to be a part of it, that's part of their national sovereignty.
I'm just going to skip ahead because he's not making any arguments here.
Okay.
You know, apart from the arguments that he's making here, that we just heard. But apart from that, he's not really making any arguments. Self-determination? That's not an argument. Vouch.
That's like, well, in order to be a part of this geopolitical hegemon, like, you need to have the thing every country has, and no country is even close to not having. Well, yeah, of course, right? Like, yeah, the USSR had a market economy. I mean, there's no alternative to that, you know, at all. So the Warsaw
Soviet Union had a market, but it did not have a market economy. It had markets, but it didn't have a market economy. Whenever you're exchanging goods, whenever there's trade, whenever there's money involved, and there's circulation of currency and commodities, you're gonna have markets in some capacity or another. Like, so again, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. I got him to admit on stream that he doesn't even know what markets are. He doesn't know anything, dude.
No, you didn't, you idiot. Did he just directly refer to the Joker laugh moment? Unironically? You don't even know what markets are! Oh my goodness. He's bragging about that moment? We gotta animate it. We have to now. True. That's actually our project. You're right. True, but I actually have to prioritize fake Alec Kyle Parker's what's it called? Commission. That's the word. The word is commission.
Yeah, he himself admits he doesn't read theory, so.
He doesn't know shit, and people want to look to that point where, you know, I lost my cool and I laughed at him, and so cringe.
Hey, what's cringe?
No, I'll tell you what's really cringe is someone who is a self-proclaimed market socialist.
You said you were drunk. Stop digging your own grave. You said you were drunk during that conversation. And now it's like, oh, I lost my temper and laughed. Okay.
Not being able to provide basic economic definitions for the point of engaging in a debate. He's a fucking idiot. Like, again, why people take this guy seriously is just beyond me. But anyways.
Don't be jealous. That's just sad.
What was he gonna say about the Soviets in Warsaw? What else can I debunk here?
There's no alternative to that, you know, at all.
That's capitalist realism right there, my friends. There is no alternative to the market. It is also, once again, not objectively true. The USSR was a centrally planned economy. The nations of Eastern Europe were all centrally planned economies.
and using rational economic planning, they were able to grow their economies linearly for decades, boom-bust free.
Ah, yes. Poland grew so much with its food shortage, with its food stamps, when Western Germany had to gift food packages to people with chocolate that was never seen in Poland. Oh, such growth, such beauty. Amazing. Amazing.
All while securing full employment, healthcare, education, housing, food, and basic economic security to their people.
Ah, yes.
Basic economic
food shortage, food stamps, good old times.
economic security that you do not have under capitalism. Vosh wouldn't know anything about that, however, considering he's an obese trust fund baby from Beverly Hills who probably lives in a rich, safe neighborhood and is...
What is your background? Exactly. What is your background, Mr. Proletariat Worker, Fighter Socialist?
Never known a day of hunger in his life.
Have you known a day of hunger in your life?
So the Warsaw Pact
Have
is okay.
you? Press X to doubt. Feel free to disprove. I bet this dude was born in privilege. I bet you.
Okay, because the countries were aligned with the USSR.
I bet this person has never wanted for anything.
The concept of countries choosing to enter a defensive alliance with the Soviet Union to protect themselves against invasion is great. Did the countries in the Warsaw Pact all choose? Hey, are you familiar with your history? Are you familiar with the history of the term tanky? When the USSR had to roll in military forces to force countries to stay part of their hegemon?
An asinine...
That's true. 1968 Czechoslovakia.
Points. Every state exercises authoritarianism to some degree or another, and the degree to which the state has to rely on direct naked force is in proportion to the degree to which that state's ideology is entrenched into the culture, as well as to the degree to which the state system is able to buy the social peace. Voss just doesn't see it because nothing that he says or does actually...
Let's hear that again. Before I explain why this is stupid.
Threatens business as usual, and on the just degree to which state exercises authoritarianism to some degree or another, and the degree to which the state has to rely on direct naked force is in proportion to the degree to which that state's ideology is entrenched.
The state only has power over its own territory. So this whole ramble has nothing to do with the USSR's invasion of Hungary, invasion of Czechoslovakia. What does the state have to do with what? What does the state being reactionary to some degree, or how did he put it?
Is in proportion or another points. Every state exercises authoritarianism to...
Authoritarian. What does the state being authoritarian have to do with invasion of other countries? You idiot. You don't even follow the example that was given. Because if you would look very bad. I've been lucky to not really experience financial stress or hunger growing up. I don't think that makes someone boogie. I think it makes someone... I'm not sure what you mean by boogie. I think it makes someone boogie to laugh at Vosh, for example, for not having felt hunger, while the person laughing at him probably did not suffer many hardships either, is what I'm saying.
Some degree or another, and the degree to which the state has to rely on direct naked force is in proportion to the degree to which that state's ideology is entrenched into the culture, as well as to the degree to which the state system is able to buy the social peace. Boss just doesn't see it because nothing that he says or does actually threatens business as usual, and on the contrary, he's a privileged, wealthy white guy who directly reaffirms liberal hegemony, so he's going to be
And you're not?
Really rewarded for his speech and advocacy. Here's the truth. The reason why the US and Western Europe didn't have to rely on direct force as much as the Eastern European countries have are for a number of reasons. For one, people are
Oh, so the USSR was just forced to invade Hungary and Czechoslovakia when Czechoslovakia wanted to introduce some reforms to its system. Oh, that was necessary. Even though the USSR officially lied that NATO and Western Germany wanted to invade Czechoslovakia. A little detail that you're omitting, aren't you? For she's in white, he's Polish. True.
Way more directly and overtly manipulated under capitalism, and thus political repression only seems like it's more obvious under socialism because the state is way less prone to lie to you and brainwash you into holding beliefs which are directly against your own best interests. And for two, historically the imperial core, through its exploitation of the world, can afford to buy the social peace with the spoils of its imperialist plunder. Take the 1800s United States settler colonial expansion out westward, for example. Cheap and free land was directly used by the US government as a pressure valve for class antagonism, effectively bribing the white proletariat and petty bourgeoisie into its complicity with genocide. Exhibit B, look at the rampant activity of socialists and communists in the 1930s during the Great Depression. First, we got FDR.
So, the USSR was just forced to invade. I get it. I think there's kind of disconnect, especially in the US. Well, for workers like Vaj, doctor, engineers, and programmers who don't struggle lumped in with the owning class. And that bugs me since it reinforces the class war that's used to distract from the owning class. This person knows nothing about Eastern European history. Literally nothing at all. And people treat him seriously. To borrow his own vocabulary. And people treat this person seriously. This is just sad. Depressingly sad.
Again, more bribes. And then second, we got a slew of anti-communist legislation, purging socialists and communists from trade unions, positions of public office, as well as the perpetual witch hunting which transpired.
This has nothing to do with what Vosh said. So to explain why the USSR had to invade the countries that wanted to introduce reforms in its systems, I want to say the West did really bad things. Is that enough? Do you now understand why USSR needed to use direct force? Because the West is bad. That's why. Evil West. Yeah, I remember.
In the 1950s,
It's high effort. It's, it's called high effort video essay.
Scare. My point is that being a wealthy first world nation with a population which directly benefits from settler colonialism and imperialist plunder tends to ramp down the needs for political repression in the direct sense of the term. For more detailed analysis on this subject, I recommend Settlers by Jay Sakai or An Indigenous People's History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbart. Back to the first point again. The notion that the...
And that has to do with USSR invading Czechoslovakia. How?
United States and Western Europe don't repress the shit out of people and their political enemies is a complete and total lie. There's a long history of intelligence agencies infiltrating, breaking up, arresting, blackmailing, and even assassinating leftist political activists and organizers going back well over a century. From COINTELPRO to the multiple Red Scares to Operation Garden Plot, where the US was planning on unleashing the army on dozens of cities to crush civil rights activism, to the direct backing and enabling of Pinochet, the Mujahideen, and dozens of other far-right dictators on our tax dollars, to the mass killings and genocides backed by the CIA, murdering millions of socialists, communists, and labor organizers around the globe. It's amazing to me that Vosh is at the very least nominally aware of these facts, and yet only selectively applies this liberal moralistic standard to Russia and China, while feigning sympathy to North and South American socialism. It's almost like the guy's an Orientalist or something. At the very least, that's the kind of sentiments and implications which you can derive from his rhetoric.
Orientalist.
Because I have never seen anybody go to the degrees which he has to shit on these countries, as well as socialist projects who hail from them.
Like, take the
Russian people are not Asian. What?
United States, for example. Let's say you see socialism emerge in some U.S. states, and there are U.S. states that are voting to succeed and they're voting to break away. Like a block of U.S. states, You think America is just going to consensually let that happen? You don't think America is going to roll in with the tanks and roll in with the military to stop that from happening? Like, considering the degree to which the U.S. government has stomped out socialism, like, literally fucking everywhere. So, like, it's okay when the U.S. government does it. It's okay when fucking America...
It's okay when I create hypotheticals when the U.S. does it. But why is it bad when the USSR actually does it?
Goes around stomping out socialism and just so they can impose capitalism. But then when, like, the Soviets move in to thwart a potential uprising which could lead to capitalist restoration.
Potential uprising is when the legal government introduces reform. This person knows absolutely nothing about history. This is so pathetic. Potential uprising.
And create geopolitical holes in their national security. It's a bad thing. No, dude. Every state exercises force and authoritarianism to some extent or another. The Soviets needed to do it more because they were not wealthy enough and because socialist psychology was not entrenched enough. Socialism actually requires you to have strong leadership. It actually requires you to have ideologically committed political thinkers and bureaucrats.
Socialism is when strong leadership. What part of Marx are you quoting that from? What page of Marx are you quoting that from?
Bureaucrats and officers and leaders, people that actually care about a cause greater than themselves. That's what it actually requires in order to function. So, like, when you liberalize and when you give people the ability to just liberalize and do whatever they want, you're by design going to get cynical opportunists that are just going to try to ruin it for everyone so that they themselves can get fucking rich. It's class warfare, my friend.
Yeah. And plus, the United States, they did very similar things. Like, they didn't do it on the same scale. I mean,
literally.
Like, they didn't, literally roll in the tanks or anything like that. But we already know about Operation Gladio. We already know about the United States covertly supporting far-right terrorists in Western Europe during this time. I mean, they were supporting, like, the United States was supporting fucking Franco, a literal fucking fascist who was engaged in something called white terror in his country, where he had literal concentration camps and shooting people.
I wish Karasu was here. Karasu is quite knowledgeable about the history of Hungary. Obviously.
Pinochet is another famous one. The White Army, the White Guardists in Russia had like the universal blessing and backing of the Western colonial powers. But yeah, no, I agree. Defending NATO and upholding and identifying with imperialism and pushing American exceptionalist propaganda to trigger and own the tankies. Exactly what I'm talking about. It's funny how anarchists say tankies not socialist when they're bourgeois individualists that always side with liberalism. Yeah, it's called that, my friend, is called projection. It's pure projection.
Indeed.
When you hear these fucking anarcho-liberals, like,
indeed,
I kind of differentiate. You have true anarchists, and then you have the anarcho-liberals. Vosh is what I call an anarcho-liberal. Basically, these people...
And you're a genocide sympathizer. I also differentiate. Okay, you're a genocidal regime sympathizer.
People have internalized petty bourgeois individualism to such an extent they can't see the forest for the trees. Anything Bosch says about us not being actual socialists and us being basically against the interests of the proletariat, anything he says about Marxism, Leninism, or actually existing socialism is pure projection. He knows not what he's talking about. By his own admission, he doesn't...
Wait. Anything he says about Marxism, Leninism is pure projection? What are you saying? That Vosh is the Marxist-Leninist? What do you mean?
Read books. So,
to my knowledge, we have not recently invaded France, though we should, to convince them to stay with us. In fact,
we didn't need to. Another point that I'd like to make is to note Vosh's underhanded comment / joke, where he says, quote, "We didn't invade France, although we should after they left NATO," which directly implies that he himself is okay with the use of coercion by the state when it serves his interests.
This person's an idiot. Really? He thought there was... That's just funny. High effort video essayist that treats a joke about invading France as a serious statement of political belief. High effort, by the way.
Once again, this outlines his Western chauvinism, hypocrisy, and Orientalism once more. We need NATO to protect...
Orientalism? What? Is France part of Asia now? Wanting to invade France is Orientalism now. Because the French are so Asiatic, as we all know. Imagine thinking ironic Francophobia needs analysis. Well, there we are. Plus Francophobia is Orientalism somehow. Somewhere, somehow in our universe.
From the big bad evil Russians and Chinese. Second point. France leaving NATO actually caused a great deal of internal strife and strained...
Okay, I'm gonna have to educate you, fellow traveler, as a person from Eastern Europe. Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth has been called Asiatic. Russia has been called Asiatic. But it's been called that by the West. But I hate to break it to you, okay? It's not Orientalism because Russian people, believe it or not, are actually not Asian. Orientalism.
Relations between countries within the alliance, enough to the degree to which it threatened its very existence. Case in point, France leaving NATO threatened the foundations of the institution. Now imagine if multiple countries tried to leave at once.
Oh! So I guess by your logic, France was then swiftly and genocidally sanctioned, right? Wasn't that what you said? That NATO bullies countries into joining it? And that if a country does not join, it will just sanction the country to death? Surely that's what happened here, right? For your logic to be consistent. Surely.
Or threaten to leave NATO all at once. That would ramp up the pressure even more so. And given the economic problems and technological lag of the communist world behind the imperialist West, given the multiple instances where this exact same thing was being threatened behind the Iron Curtain, do you now see why the Soviets were poised to do as they did?
We didn't need to, because they're so economically entangled and entrenched with our businesses, and they're still aligned with us. We don't need to worry about France defecting and going socialist, because they're fucking not. The issue is like the socialist countries, Warsaw.
And yet they were not sanctioned after leaving NATO. What a shock.
Weren't as wealthy. They couldn't buy off the social peace with the spoils of imperialism like the Western countries could, and they didn't really have enough time to completely embed and entrench themselves, and in the end, they ultimately got betrayed from above by their own weak leadership that ended up capitulating to the pressure.
UK had their Brexit. They left.
To the pressure of whom? To the pressure of whom? The solidarity movement? The workers' solidarity movement? Are you kidding me? At that point, the USSR was weak as well. You idiot.
Left the EU, and they were allowed to. It was a stupid decision. I disagree with it. I think it was dumb, but they were allowed to.
The Polish People's Republic leadership was far smarter and far stronger than you will ever be, fellow traveler. I'm just gonna say, I don't really like it much, but it was far braver and far smarter than you. Oh yeah, and it also was far more socialist than you. They knew more about socialism than you ever will while we're at it, even though it didn't really implement real socialism. There you go. There you have it. That is my personal opinion on this matter. In fact, the Polish People's Republic was a better socialist country than the USSR.
But yeah, if it was the countries of Eastern Europe and they autonomously made the choice to join up with the USSR and what have you, this is the reason why. And this is the reason why so many leftists online are pro-imperialism, as long as it's not being done by the US, okay? They need to...
You don't know what imperialism is. Like, that's such a loaded statement. Like, the bourgeoisie, the capitalist powers of the world, the predominant capitalist powers of the world are constantly trying to impose capitalism wherever they go. So the socialist bloc and the socialist bloc countries should be willing to do the same thing. And
what?
No, it wasn't fucking imperialism. It's not imperialism when you directly subsidize the developments of other countries and help them develop their own independent, self-sufficient economies so that they actually can stand up on their own 2 feet and have some fucking dignity for themselves. So...
You mean like Poland that had food shortages and had to do stamps? That sort of dignity? Amazing. How dignified.
Yeah, again, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. He's economically and politically and historically illiterate. And for whatever reason, people
No, that's projection.
This guy like he's an expert just because he's got a deep voice and he's good at...
Vosh never claimed to be an expert. That's one. And you are certainly not an expert. Especially not on Eastern European history.
Talking.
To downplay imperialism when it's done by their side, so they overstate imperialism when it's being done by the West. For instance...
It's not overstating when you point to the obvious facts that America and Western Europe have done more...
I mean, that's true. That does help. That does help. See, if only Lucy had a nice voice.
Irreparable damage to the world, and have directly had a hand to play in the stomping out of socialism everywhere and anywhere that such movements have emerged, It's not an overstatement to point out the fact that the United States has backed numerous genocides, has partook in and is continuing to partake in genocides as we speak.
Yeah.
If any has partook.
Because the USSR has never done a genocide in its existence. For sure. The US is responsible for global poverty. Children killed by hunger.
Took in and is continuing to partake in genocides as we speak. If anybody is downplaying or underestimating the amount of damage that one side's imperialism has done to the world, it is Vosh and Vosh alone.
Says the Holodomor denier. Hello, Master Maverick. What's going on here? We're talking about our friend, fellow traveler. So, hello, Master Maverick. What brings you to the stream? How did you find this stream? I always ask when I see people that I don't remember or recognize. But if you were here before and I don't remember, then apologies. But if you can, then tell me how you found the stream.
Even as modern rival imperialist powers, Russia and China aren't guilty of anything resembling the kind of widespread.
This wasn't my YouTube recommended. What sort of content do you like watching? Do you like games? Do you like politics? Are you a progressive? Do you like history? Do you like languages or art? Vosh sleeps on a giant pile of gold coins, like in that picture. Feels like someone's salty about a certain debate to me. I'm probably wrong.
Spread depravity and inhumanity which the US and Western colonial powers have.
Yeah, gaming videos. I don't ever watch politics videos or history stuff. Well, I'm a combination of all of these things, okay? I do video games, politics, history, languages, and art. So I think you will find yourself at home. See, we're playing Final Fantasy Tactics while watching politics.
Have and continue to do. Of the top 10 bloodiest regimes in history, Russia and China don't even rank on the top 10 list. And this piece of shit Vosh is going to sit here and say that we're the one.
Is that so? Is that so? Let's check.
Down 10 list. 10 bloodiest regimes in history, Russia and China don't even.
Let's see. The deadliest dictator regimes in history, a list. Nazi Holocaust. Stalinist terror. Don't even make the top 10, huh? Okay, this is a list of 10. Let's see if those countries really don't even make the first 10. Oh, but that must be evil propaganda, right? Let's see. Let's see that list. The deadliest regimes in history. Number 1, Maoist catastrophe Mao Zedong. Estimated number of victims 47,263,1517. 517. So over 47 million. Interesting. Nazi Holocaust Adolf Hitler 13,674,790. Stalinist terror 13,038,405. Wow. People's Republic of China number 1. Soviet Union number 3. Well, what do you know? They did make the first 10. Was that a lie? By fellow traveler? The Russian Empire is also on that list. North Korea, the Ottoman Empire. I will say though that the British Empire should definitely be on a list like this.
Even rank on the top 10 list. And this piece of shit Vosh is going to sit here.
Piece of shit Vosh.
And say that
Vosh should be on that list.
We're the ones downplaying imperialism. Fuck you.
They claim that 2014 in Ukraine, the ousting of their leader was some kind of pro-Western coup. They talk about it like it was a pro-Western Nazi coup, like we literally installed a government. Now this...
No, but we definitely had backing and support. I don't understand how this guy can recognize how the coup in Bolivia, like he's super sympathetic to South American leftists. I don't understand how he can be super sympathetic to Bolivia and nuanced and understanding. Like he understands that Jeanine Inez was definitely a CIA plant, definitely a psyop of some sorts. Like he fully believes and understands the role historically the CIA has played in regime change. He understands it when it's Bolivia and Evo Morales. But when it comes to Ukraine, all of a sudden, it's hard for you to believe that the pro-Russian regime was just conveniently ousted and replaced by a pro-NATO regime?
So those are totally two different situations then. It's simple. Vosh is right and FT is wrong. Ousted.
As I stated before, this is bizarre to me. He understands and acknowledges the deep history of CIA fuckery and regime change in Latin America, and yet he just conveniently ignores it when it's being done in Eastern Europe. Why?
I wouldn't have a problem.
Because it's incomparable, you buffoon.
Problem with Vosh if it wasn't for the fact that he had hundreds of thousands of subscribers. I don't necessarily even have.
Oh. So salty. If only Vosh were not so successful. Why does Vosh has to be so successful and not me, not me? I deserve the success, not Vosh. Oh boy.
The problem with this guy being a bad takes factory and who in active.
And you're a good takes factory. High effort video essay.
And spreads imperialist, anti-communist Cold War propaganda constantly while reaffirming liberal hegemony. It's the fact that he does this while claiming to be a socialist. And he does this while claiming to be a socialist while having the subscriber count that he does. So to such a perverse extent, he is just poisoning the discourse, creating so much confusion and creating this fucking spawning an entire generation of what I call basically social neoliberals. Like that's what it is. He's creating a whole generation of social neoliberals, social democrats, social fascists, people who are like left of center but committed, ideologically committed anti-communists. And it's absolutely fucking cursed.
And pro-imperialist.
So I guess all the communists in Poland after World War I, all the socialists, they were just principally anti-communist because they did not align with the Bolshevik line.
this is objectively, factually not the case. It's very plain to see this is objectively not the case. We had a guy on who tried to defend that point, and it went really, 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 really poorly for him. No one will ever be able to defend that point in a straight-up conversation. It's not possible to, because it's not true. But they have to pretend that's the case because they want us to be the monsters that they justify and defend. We need to be that bad in order for their propaganda on their side to work. Now, hey.
Wow, speak for yourself. Like, dude, it's funny. Like, if you swapped the Warsaw and socialist countries for US and EU and vice versa, that would actually be a way more apt description.
That's so.
So, guys, let's go. I got a little PDF for you guys. Triumph of Evil. So, here's the list of atrocities and genocides committed by the United States. And this isn't even a complete list. But yeah, India, Filipino, Japan, Korea, Indonesia.
Wait. So when you're being given genocide done by the US, that's fine. But suddenly when someone points out the genocide done by the USSR, you play defense. Isn't that a double standard? I can look at a list of genocides done by the US and say, yeah, those are genocides done by the US, and it's awful. Can you do the same about a list of genocides committed by the USSR? Press X to doubt. I doubt it.
Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Iraq, other.
Cambodia.
Not counting the millions of people who are starved and killed by preventable illness due to our fucking sanctions. We've got 11 million minimum. Soviet Union has not done anything like this. I mean, yeah, people can point to like
Soviet Union has done nothing like this, huh?
Afghanistan. And I mean, a lot of innocent people died, but they didn't kill millions of people in Afghanistan. No, not even close. And they haven't engaged in anything resembling just like this deliberate, blanket, systematic exterminations of peoples. Like, are you?
Oh, Dzienkovo Operation 1937-1938. A pretty deliberate extermination of Polish people. Counter it. Tell me how it's not correct. Tell me how it didn't happen. Or how all of the Polish people just actually deserved it. Because they were potential rebels.
Are you fucking kidding me? The Soviets weren't the one raping and pillaging the world. They were trying to help build it up. They were trying to help save it. So yeah.
They were trying to help save it. Okay.
Read Triumph of Evil from this segment's. If you take like the top 10 most bloody regimes in history, Russia and China don't even come within the top 10 ranking. Like, honestly, they don't. Like,
is that
really,
so?
It's really America, Britain, France, Germany, and Spain. Those are pretty much like the top 5. And then the rest of them aren't even fucking, the rest of them aren't even communist regimes. They're all capitalist regimes. Like, dude.
What's the rest?
How are you gonna fucking sit here and look at freedom fighters like Ho Chi Minh? Look at freedom fighters like Ho Chi Minh, or Kim Il Sung, or Fidel Castro.
I'm sorry. Don't lump in Ho Chi Minh with Stalin. That is. I'm sorry. That's offensive to Ho Chi Minh, to lump him with Stalin. That's very offensive to Ho Chi Minh, actually. What a comparison. Unlike Stalin, Ho Chi Minh was not a genocidal maniac, as far as I know. Hey Lucy, how much would I need to donate for you to read my old essay from last year? You can donate however much you feel is the correct amount to support your hopefully favorite streamer. And I will read it, okay? Donate the amount you feel is right, and I will read your essay. My goodness. And yeah, I know the US is awful. But I also know the USSR was awful. I don't have to defend the USSR to say that the US is awful. I guess that is the difference between us. Huh. I guess that is the difference. Let me see. Oh. Thank you. Thank you for the $15, fake Alec Parker. So where's the essay? Or we have to finish this first.
I don't understand like how you're going to look to figures like this and you're going to say like the Soviets are committing atrocities and crimes against humanity. When you consider that the opposite end of it was like the evil reactionary side that was basically feeding all of their people to the grinders so that only like 2 to 3% of the indigenous population could benefit from imperialism, these comprador capitalists. It's so crazy to me. This either demonstrates a massive amount of ignorance on his end or he's just being a propagandist. He's literally like deliberately being a propagandist. Maybe he is ideologically committed.
And you're not a propagandist, supposedly. Spoiler alert, they're committing atrocities now.
We're genuinely convinced that the Soviet Union was what it was. But the thing is, people have tried to come on and explain that it wasn't that bad. I have tried to come on and explain it wasn't that bad, and they actually saved a great deal of lives and did a great
It was that bad. Actually, it was that bad.
Deal of good for the world. I kept trying to explain this. And you want to know what he did? He's just like, oh, I wouldn't talk about saving the world from fascism. They almost joined the fascists and made this loaded fucking argument about the Soviet Axis talks or the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which is totally
true.
It doesn't even fucking prove the point he was trying to make.
Doesn't it? Does it not? Really?
Yeah. I think he's just a fluent propagandist, honestly, if you want me to be quite frank.
Yeah, at this point, I just think someone's fucking paying him. Like, maybe not. Well, actually, he is being paid. He's being paid by all of his dumbass subscribers, but I think someone else is probably paying him.
Ooh, burn.
So, because, no wonder why he's so adamantly against communism. He's a multi-millionaire. He's basically a member of the ruling class.
Multi-millionaire Vosh. Excuse me? He's a multi-millionaire? Part of the ruling class? Okay. What? I laughed so hard when I heard that. He's a multi-millionaire. You know, Vosh recently said, I cannot afford the expensive treatment for my back anymore. The multi-millionaire. Oh my God. He's a trillionaire. Exactly. What the hell? What's happening?
Like, of course, he's going to be adamantly aligned against the interests of the global proletariat. But yeah, no, Soviets, if you actually look at their record and compare it to the US and NATO, Soviets aren't guilty of anything, even fucking touching the Western imperial powers. Like, not even close. Not even close.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, if you care about America...
And Vosh, by the way, is a multi-millionaire.
Imperialism. If you think American imperialism is so bad, why not talk about the times that it actually happens instead of making shit up, right? Like, why not...
We do talk about it, but then you fucking downplay it or disregard it. Like, you brought up 2 examples.
Downplay or disregard it sounds like genocide denial. Sounds like what you do.
Of NATO imperialism, just blew them off as like just not being that big of a deal.
Yeah.
They're like, dude,
or
like,
they're necessary.
Yeah. Like, this is what pisses me off about liberals. They will always condemn something in the abstract.
Projection. They will downplay it as necessary. That's what you do.
Abstract, like, previous acts of imperialist aggression and like previous acts of U.S. fuckery and meddling that have literally resulted in the deaths and immiseration and displacements of quite literally tens of millions of people. They'll always say it's bad in the abstract and say that these things were always bad. Like, but this time it'll be different, right? If we just get involved here, if we do this there, if we participate in a regime
Ukraine asked for help.
Change here, if we do some sanctions there, Bosch is getting his wish.
And Ukraine isn't just asking like the US for help. It's asking anyone who is willing to help for help.
Man, and the Russian people are going to suffer for it because of those sanctions. Bosch is getting his wishes. He's getting his genocidal sanctions, which are probably going to be placed on Russia. So, like, he's just a piece of shit. Like, why does anyone think this guy is left wing or take him seriously?
Why are you so jealous? Why are you so jelly?
All, like, fucking seriously, dude.
Literally dead.
Not focus on the stuff we actually do. Our support of Saudi Arabia and Israel are monstrous and indefensible. Frankly, the fact that we are so buddy-buddy with China in spite of all the shit they do is also pretty suspect.
There he goes again, implying that us being on anything resembling friendly relations with another world power is a bad thing. Again,
oh, so it's a whoa, okay. When it's about China, then it's okay. That's interesting.
Xenophobic Orientalist sentiments. China
yes.
Bad, Yellow Man bad.
But they wouldn't agree.
How will you square Bosch's Orientalism with his support of Taiwan? How do you square that circle in your mind? Because I have no clue how you do that.
With that, right? All the shit we've done in Latin America, all the shit we've done in Central America, all the shit that we've done, our unwillingness to engage in proper, economic, non-conditional investment in Africa, the fact that we still back the IMF and the World Bank and let them ruin developing countries so they're amenable to American business interests. If you care about American imperialism, which you should.
Okay, so all that is fucking true, but you're still supporting the military apparatus of fucking imperialism. So how does that work?
Like he's still supporting NATO. Let me explain his mindset. This is the mindset of a liberal, right? He's not tackling this from the position that these things are systematically, institutionally bad, but it's not actually because it's an inherent aspect of imperialism. It's because it's being mismanaged. It's not imperialism done right. It's not a good.
That's not what Vosh is saying in the slightest, but well done creating your own theory in your own head of what Vosh is actually saying.
It's not a good intervention. It's not a proper U.S. intervention. It's not a good war. He's coming at this from the mindset of, all those previous actions are bad and these actions are bad.
This is such projection that I cannot believe it. You were the one defending good wars that the USSR was forced to fight to keep countries in line. You were the one doing that. What do you mean?
But we need to reform the system. We need to make better imperialism or more friendly foreign policy. We need to reform it so that it's more tenable. It's not as morally, it doesn't hurt our moral sensibilities as much. We can reform it. But the point is that there is no reforming it. And he analyzes it from the mindset that it's just incompetence. Like, the imperialists are just incompetent. Like,
well,
they don't...
you like to play defense for genocide. You clearly have no morals.
Know what they're doing. Like, that they're incompetent. We're just the big jumbo lumbering empire. This is the analysis Chomsky gives. That America is just a lumbering empire that doesn't know what it's doing, but it actually means well. It doesn't mean to, do a little genocidal sanctions there. a little carpet bombing there, a little economic restructuring here. No, or a little coup here and there. No, it always means well. It always means well. Okay, so did fucking Hitler, dude.
This is also projection. The USSR always means well. It wanted to save the world, you see.
So, in that regard, he's tackling it from the mindset of a reformist. Like, he wants to reform it and make it better. He's tackling it from the mindset where he is identifying with the state apparatus in the US and NATO. Like, he's not tackling it from the mindset of a revolutionary, where really you should be looking to smash these things and replace them with a new regime based on a new set of...
Excuse me? This is a socialist saying that? Socialism when you replace an old regime with a new one? Socialism is when you smash a regime and replace it with your own. What?
Socialist proletarian values? No. So that's the mindset of the liberal. That is the mindset of Bosch. They will always condemn things bad in the abstract. They will always condemn past actions of aggression in the abstract. And
you will not condemn any bad actions of the USSR at all. So I guess that's a pretty big difference between you two, huh?
Because they identify with imperialism in the current system, they'll take the interpretation, the naive interpretation that they can reform it and make it better. And that, though what our government does is bad, even though like what we do is monstrously objectively evil, this therefore justifies us taking a magnifying glass and looking at the bad actions and, misconduct of other governments and other regimes, putting a magnifying glass over it, analyzing it, and then blowing it up way, way, way bigger so that they can try to put it on equal moral footing to condemn that other government and make them out to be just as, if not more evil, or just as a bigger threat to the world as the United States. It's this equalizing they do.
It is the liberal moral equalizing which is done so that A, they can provide ideological justification for present acts of aggression as to concern troll for regime change and or demonize rival imperialist powers, and B, downplay their own state's atrocities and crimes against humanity as to trick and manipulate people into thinking these actions...
I'm from Poland, so how does that argumentation work against me? It doesn't, does it? Sadly for you.
Mark my words, if this were the year 2002, Bosch would be one of the many idiots who were on board with the Iraq War. In fact, I'd be willing to bet my top dollar that no matter how far back you go, using Bosch's logic and framework, you could find all sorts of US interventions and military adventurism justifiable because we need to stop the Reds. We need to stop these evil Russians and Chinese. Vodka, bad. Yellow man, bad. If we were living in the 80s, Bosch would be a supporter of the Mujahideen freedom fighters. If this were the 1970s, he'd be supporting the Pinochet dictatorship, or the South Vietnamese dictatorship, whatever. It is what it is.
It's basically like a pot calling the kettle black, more or less.
Exactly. Well said, fellow traveler.
It's equalizing. That way they can justify selectively supporting regime change, selectively supporting interventions and wars and sanctions here and there. This is an imperialist, people. This is the mindset of an imperialist. And with that being said, I'm done. I'm done with Bosch. Let's move on.
It's imperial management, basically. That's what he wants. He wants imperial management. And when you were talking, I was thinking to the Bernie Sanders 2016 and 2020 campaign. Bernie Sanders would have been great for U.S. imperialism. He would have kept this shit going a lot longer than it probably would last. But, the ruling class just doesn't want to give up even a little bit. Like, they will literally just...
These people are just LARPers. They're literally just LARPers.
They will go out of their way to even sabotage their own interest just for the short-term
their cosplay, their fantasies about great revolutions while sitting comfortably on their asses in their nice warm homes in the US. Like, come on. So what have you done for the US Revolution? What have you done for the revolutionary effort? Exactly. What have you done? I'll answer for you. You've done nothing.